Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to another exciting episode of Tales of Citizens right here on the Sound Strategy Network. I am Bridger, I'll be your host today as we dive into Star Citizen and ask the deep questions. And joining me as always is my crew of misfit soldiers, or no, we're past the holidays, aren't we? I've got Callie Thulu
Broken
here
toys.
with me. Welcome, sir.
Well, thank you very much. Your crew of broken toys at this point might be more accurate.
Yeah, broken toys including computers and YouTube. Hello, Gray, welcome.
How's it going?
All right, so we're going to jump right into it here because we're already a little late because YouTube. Thanks, YouTube. We're going to thank YouTube for sponsoring this show today, for making it as late as it is. So let's jump right into it. We always start with a very brief segment we call Life in the Verse, where if the game were out, we'd talk about the various things we did in Star Citizen and how awesome it is. As of right now, this week, I died to missiles. How about you guys?
Missiles. And then more missiles. But actually, this week I've been doing a lot of RimWorld Alpha 8, which was released a little earlier in
It's a
December.
PG-13 show. Don't need any of those. Go ahead.
The
What is this?
unfortunately named RimWorld is Dwarf Fortress Light on Alien Worlds. The concept is you've got three colonists. It's by Ludeon Studios, Ludeon. You have three colonists. They crash land on a planet, and then they have to build a ship to escape it before pirates, tribals, other colonies, mechanoids, and some kind of psychic beast kill them all. So you create some colonies, you mine, you build buildings, and then you try to get away.
I've broke it.
Yes.
You know what it actually
That
reminds
would
me
be
of?
par for the course.
It actually reminds me a little bit of Prison Architect.
Yes, it's again Prison Architect, RimWorld, Nomoria, Towns. All these other games are coming out. They're all kind of a Dwarf Fortress. I won't say clone, light. They're Dwarf Fortress light, and they have many aspects for fun in the traditional Dwarf Fortress sense.
What have you been up to recently, Gray?
You know, I've actually spent quite a bit of time playing League of Legends and Smite, because why not? There's also the joys of, for those who are dying to missiles, no missile matches. There are some
Yeah, I've
great
seen people
folks
getting
who
those
are putting
together.
those together. They are apparently a lot of fun. I haven't been able to make one yet, but I have watched a couple streamed, and they look like a blast.
Yeah, that actually, because I have played the single player of AC quite a lot, and I did enjoy the combat against the Vandal because until you get to a certain level, they don't use too many missiles for the most part. The other thing I was trying to do, actually, and you can see in this video, I was trying to do what I saw somebody on YouTube do, which was scan and lock, like lock multiple people, which apparently was supposed to be able to be done in the 325A, but I couldn't get it to be done in mine. I don't know if I was doing something wrong. I was just doing scan and then switch next target. Maybe they all
There's
have to
a
be
lock
pinned.
Target button.
Yeah.
Like pin target you have to use.
So you have to pin the target after you lock it with a missile or before you lock it with a missile?
Yes.
After you achieve
It's after
lock,
you
you
lock.
have to pin it, and
I
then
see.
when you come back to it, it's
So
easier.
the pinning is what keeps it locked.
Yeah.
I believe
Gotcha.
so, yeah.
Okay, so let us dive right then into the feedback this week, because the only thing that's been happening to me is I've been sucked back into Europa Universalis 4. Don't worry, it'll go. I'll get over it in a few weeks. So this week we did have a bit of
It's
feedback.
like shingles. It just clears up occasionally.
Yeah, exactly. Schmunkel98, very German name, Germanic, or that could be Scandinavian. I don't really know
Or-
those languages.
It could be
Could
Yiddish.
be.
No,
I'd go with German.
I don't know. I don't know these. So he asks, quote, should patch 1.0 have been delayed? I know this isn't going to win me any popularity contest, but I believe that there should have been delayed the patch until they could have pushed out a version with less bugs and a more functional cutlass. I think CIG strayed from the quote-unquote when it's ready formula here, and it hurt them a bit. Let me know your thoughts and keep up the great work on the show. Thanks. And that was Shrumkel98.
I want to start off by saying if the cutlass is your biggest concern, you haven't played against an Avenger. The ship actually doesn't have normal damage models right now, from what people can tell.
Yeah.
Large portions of it are actually invincible. It was put out there clearly in a not quite finished state, and that's what happened with this patch.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it was up to the usual snuff in some ways, But at the same time, they were also trying to push it out as a holiday present to us. I'll take that.
Yeah,
Even if it means there was just a little less polish in some ways, it's still pre-alpha, guys. We can expect to have some problems. It's been surprisingly easy before now.
Yeah.
Yep.
For my take on it, it's to keep up with their usual release quality, they should in fact have delayed it a bit. But it's about what I expect from alpha releases. The server issues they had no idea they're going to encounter. That was probably the biggest of all the issues, was losing sync every 15 minutes or being disconnected constantly, that kind of thing. So overall, I'd say it's not a bad release, but it's not as good as the ones that they've had before.
Okay, so my take on this whole thing, it's hard to know when your software is going to be bug-free, right? I don't think they put it out expecting to have the massive problems they had on that Friday before the holidays. So, I mean, to say they should have waited until it had less bugs, well, yeah, you could say that about every version of every piece of software ever. The problem is you don't know what bugs you have until they're out. Like, under the known issues, they didn't have it listed like, will not connect to servers 90% of the time. Like, if that was in the known issues, then I probably would have said, yep, probably should have waited on this. But obviously, they had a fairly untested server version, too, at least not at this scale.
The other thing that's worth noting is the biggest bug that people experienced, and I mean the biggest bug, was the language drop-down menu. You still get topics that are bringing this up, because people open up the launcher and they're like, I just get a black screen. Yes, that's because it has no language selected. Go in there, pick English or French. Go. It'll work. That particular issue is definitely one of the few little things that I was like, man, I wonder how that got through the build.
It could be that there was a check-in that was made to the language file that the developer made, but they don't check in their individual config files. They have a stock one that was missing that setting. I've actually seen some similar things for localization. It's a tragedy, but usually it's a 10-minute fix.
Oh, yeah.
At the developer side of things.
I'm sure it still is. It's just
I'm kind of surprised they didn't put out a small hotfix just to like make it default to English or something. But I guess that then everybody that had it default to something else would be angry. Yeah, no real easy way to fix that. So the other piece of feedback that we did get back is from Vogon Poem Lover.
With an awesome name, just for reference.
Sure.
That is a pretty good name.
That cannot be stressed enough. I love that name.
And he said, one thing that seems a bit off on the last topic was how to balance the game for newer players and the need for a mechanism to even the playing field a bit so that less experienced players could possibly compete against more seasoned players. I think where this argument falls apart is that CIG and Chris Roberts in particular has repeatedly said that the game isn't intended to be primarily PvP, but is primarily PvE. Assuming that this is true now and in the future, then as long as new players stay in UEE space, where there are consequences should a player go rogue and attack other players, then there shouldn't be much of a concern. Certainly, new players wouldn't necessarily be able to take on the roles or other jobs which require higher level skills and more advanced tools and chips, but there should still be plenty of roles and jobs for them to take to allow them to build up their skills and resources. Only once a player has developed those skills and tools should they venture out into less controlled space alone. Unquote. I have some problems with this argument, but I think he's certainly factually right that they have intended newer players to stick to the PvE area, essentially. But what do you guys think about this?
Well, newbie areas are definitely I won't say a thing, but that's a cliche from the MMO genre. You stay in that one area of space, you do your thing, and then you eventually you go out to higher level areas. But in EVE Online, they had the whole the space security concept, and that worked pretty well. But then you'd have players who would sit in channel in these new areas and try and draw new players out there to get hammered or ganked or killed, promising them ships, or they'd set up contracts was a big one. They'd set up a contract with a lot of money for just a little bit of movement, and then they try to get someone to fly out there, and then halfway there it goes to 0-0 space if you're not paying attention, and you get shot and killed. So they would try and get people to go through their traps. And I say that as someone who was one of the players who was sitting at the gate ready to jump somebody, and we got a lot of new players with their cargo ships popping in and getting blown up. I am sorry for those of you who were at the receiving end of that. It was a good fun time for me, however. So, so that's you can create a newbie area, but given that we already know that there's going to be lawless space, and we have the UEE space plus the Banu and the other regions of space, that you're going to have to lure new players out there somehow if you want to get them when they aren't experienced or aren't skilled up or don't have good ships, and that's probably going to happen. We know player missions are going to be a thing.
Yes, but and aside from the whole luring people out of their safety thing, that is a social engineering issue.
Getting a space fan.
Hey, I got some candy. You want some candy? So, aside from that whole thing, the problem I have is if you make the inner UEE space like so safe, you also have to make it so unprofitable. Because if it was just super safe, then people would just, okay, I don't mind sitting here for hours and hours just grinding out like $1 an hour's worth of these trade runs that's perfectly safe. That's boring. But that becomes the most optimal thing. Well, you're right. It's not going to be safe theoretically. There's going to be, NPC
pirates
that are going to pirate you, but they're going to be lower level because the thing that new players are supposed to have to be able to fight by themselves.
Let's take a look at a great example they've already given of us of this, though. The system that's next door to Terra, the name eludes me at the moment, where there's the underground racing thing and all that, but there's also the stop-in port where people can pick up a load of cargo and then take that to Terra. That's the whole route. It's a trade run from the system next to Terra to introduce people to the idea of trading and let them make a slight profit. You can bet that there's going to be two mechanics they use to balance that. The first one is obviously, price per unit, what you'll actually make, yada, yada, yada. The second one will be if they start noticing that people are finding a way to exploit it, you can bet that those sorts of newbie stations, those sorts of areas will limit the quantity of goods that you can pick up at any given time. So they'll say, well, there's only 200 tons of this material that ships brought in that we need you to transport into Terra. So these introductory zones will have the ability to artificially limit the amount that you could actually profit, even if it's a decent amount of money. It might be a limited amount of that cargo that you could actually bring from point A to point B. No, you're not. No, you're not. That's the idea, is that if you're saying that this entire place exists, this newbie zone exists basically to break customs. That's the whole in-law reason is this station exists so that they can avoid paying customs on big shipments.
See, in the fiction you're saying that
yes.
they're doing that to avoid customs things. I see. Yeah,
they already said in fiction they're doing it to avoid customs. So
immersion restored.
Exactly. But in that way, they're basically saying, well, we only brought in 100,000 tons to bring to Terra. That's all we've got. You got a big Misk Hull C that wants to do some incredibly huge load? Well, tough beans. There isn't enough cargo.
Fair enough. I mean, the thing that still bothers me is people are saying, Squadron 42 is the newbie trading, and that's true, but I think you're not understanding the skill gap that's going to be present here between people who have been playing Arena Commander since basically now to people who have never really played a space sim before, to people who have never even played a flight sim before. People are just like, oh, I heard my friends are going to be playing this game. I like World of Warcraft, and I've always liked sci-fi. Star Wars is really cool. Let me check this thing out. And they go in and they find the harsh reality. Even if they go through, Squadron 42, I guarantee you that's not going to be so harsh that people can't complete it unless they're actually ready for, that would just frustrate 90% of the new players who have never played a space game before.
Did any of you guys ever, I think it was back in 2004, 2005, there was a game that came out called Star Sonata.
Never heard of that one.
I recall that one, yeah.
It was an overhead sort of, think Space Invaders style. You're looking down at your little ship, and it was a full physics of, you had to thrust backwards to slow your ship down and all that kind of thing. For the time, it was actually quite the interesting game. They made what I would call the mistake of creating newbie zones, where you literally shot space rats. And the idea was you leveled up your ship, your character, and eventually made your way to higher level zones over and over again until eventually you could basically go anywhere in the universe because you were, assmungus level high and had some giant ship that could one-shot anybody. That was the whole game, was trying to get into one of those giant ships, get a big group of them together, and then become Emperor of the Universe. And then it would reset all the persistent servers, shuffle all of the universe, but you got to keep your levels in your ship. There was a win condition for their MMO, which was pretty cool. And it led to these giant fleet wars. That said, what you're talking about with learning curve with Squadron 42, it's going to be a lot closer to the levels right after shooting space rats. There will be some difficult things. There will be some challenges in the game. But when you climb that ladder, you can expect the moment you get over that top rung and you do something stupid, you'll be punished by somebody who has a ship 3 or 4 times the size of your hangar.
So it's more of a learning cliff.
It's a cliff.
Well, that's what EVE Online is, right? I mean,
yes.
I should at least take some heart in the fact that EVE Online has a learning cliff just as deadly as what we're, what I'm fearing Star Citizen is going to be. Yeah, they still get new people,
Yeah,
they do.
So
they do. Most flight
Star
sims...
Citizen has the advantage that there are multiple kinds of play.
Yeah.
It's not just in ship. So you will get people that come in and they get blown to hell the moment that they leave what you'd call safe space. There's some pirate who's camping there and they're gone.
Yeah.
But you're also going to have a lot of new people that go to the semi-safe space and they don't get blown up, or they run into an NPC and they win. Because there are going to be a lot of NPCs.
Yes.
Or for that matter, they might, in safe space, meet somebody that they want to man a turret, or they might be a FPS person. There's all of these great options that go well beyond the range of, are you going to be able to fly your ship from point A to point B safely? There's much more to the game than the ship, which is a wonderful part of this, and one of the reasons I'm actually rather excited about it.
Well, and most flight sims, if you look back at the old Elite games, the old Wing Commander games, it was a massive learning curve there to get your ship to where you could fly it with something like competence. And people could get through the entire game in that case and never quite get to that point. Others, really took to it. If you look at DCS right now, you can start out with some fairly simple controls and learn the game, but that's an online flight sim, World of DCS, I think is what it is. And it's got a learning cliff to those controls, just like every other flight sim I've ever played personally. Now, something like War Thunder in arcade mode, there's no learning curve there. You throw your plane around and it wings back and forth. But I don't think we're going to see that, and we haven't really seen it in Arena Commander so far.
All right, well, that's something we'll have to... The new player experience is going to be key. I mean, I know EVE Online has gone through like 6 iterations of like, how do we get new people into this super complex game? Because I know I played it and it had one really, really crappy like tutorial thing, and then I came back and it had a slightly better one. It allowed you to pick which way you wanted to start, and now I know they've got some new one going on now, so... hopefully, and unfortunately, the thing that makes a bad tutorial is not actually thinking about it until the very end of your production. That's the worst. That's the way you make a really crappy tutorial.
Which is why Squadron 42 has a lot of promise, because they're doing that from the beginning, and that's the first thing they're doing. So it's not going to be an issue as long as you actually play through Squadron 42. I imagine a lot of players will be like, nah, I want to skip that. I want to get right into multiplayer and have some fun. And then they're going to, slam into the wall of their hangar as they try to take off. Yeah. I know that's not going to actually happen. That part's on wires.
Or even worse, it gets really long and awkward like Galaxy Quest, where you're just screeching against the side for like 30 seconds.
Everyone glances at each other, rolls their eyes. Yeah, that would be worthwhile.
That's another option. All right, so I mean, we talked about a lot last week. Let's get to what we're talking about this week. But before we go there, I have a problem, guys. I think you guys know that we had a live stream a little while ago, right? We had that big giant 6-hour live stream, and it made me a little angry. And when I get angry, I got to vent. And when I vent, it's called a Bridger rant. That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, I got tuned in to the live stream where they were going to be doing the big holiday reveal and talk about Arena Commander 1.0, and they said it's going to be 6 hours long, and I turned it off. Why did I turn it off? Because I wasn't going to sit there for 6 hours. I didn't actually turn it off. I'm just lying. I actually had it on in the background.
You
but
watched
I did.
the entire thing.
I did go and play something else while it was on a different monitor. But my point is, I wanted to turn it off, but I couldn't because I'm too big of a fan, and screw them for using that to their advantage. Here's the thing.
He played a turn-based game, and he spent 20 minutes per turn because he was watching the stream.
Something like that. Actually, that's why I got started playing Europa Universalis again. It's their fault. So here's the thing. You got 6 hours of live stream. You've got information that people actually care about to fill 1 hour of live stream. As much as I love the guys at the various studios, not all of them are good at presentations. That's entirely fine. I'm not good at most things. Not least of which is painting, because my hands still have polyurethane on them. Ow. But my point is, if you want to make a good presentation, and good on them, because I don't think they had anybody whose job it was, like, we got this live stream, Joey, you need to take care of all the details of setting up this live stream. No. It was like, everybody's working on getting Arena Commander done, and they're like, hey guys, didn't we have a live stream we were supposed to be working on? No time! We'll wing it! That's kind of what it felt like in the end. But I really would appreciate it if in the future they sort of condensed it down. I really liked what they do at their big presentations when they have like those special produced things from the various offices, so we get to see, and I like to meet the team ones as well. I'm not like trying to say we should never see what some of the smaller people are saying and only hear Chris Roberts talk about the game, but I would like them to be better produced, I guess is what it comes down to. And when it's 6 hours and everybody's winging it, I just want to turn it off and come back and hope that somebody else has watched and taken notes for me. And that's not what you want.
I'm suspecting the live streams have the same problem that George R.R. Martin has.
They talk about food for too long.
They want to kill everybody?
People fear to edit him. So that they don't want to cut Chris Roberts and co short, but at the same time, chopping half the live stream out would probably have been okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't chop it out, you just wouldn't have it on the agenda.
Exactly.
Like, why am I not on the agenda? Well,
no, the fact is, it was a really great collection. I think it's important to note that the live stream wasn't one continuous stream. It was a collection of smaller streams.
That's true. Right.
And
they went to each individual studio.
They were all posted eventually, separately. If I'm not mistaken, weren't they? I mean, they had summarized it. They'd cut it into pieces.
I'd have to go check. Apparently Bridger is going to check, and I hear
typing noises.
I shall ramble on.
But I think that it was a really great segmented piece. I think that as those individual spots, it was one of the more informative ones we've seen. But it required a hell of an attention span to watch that whole thing. And a lot of free time, you know.
Well,
I'm not even going to go into that one.
As a founding member of the Short Attention Span Theater, I admit that I have not actually watched the live stream. I saw it and thought to myself, okay, I should watch that, and then never got back to it.
Yeah, I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched some of it in the background and then went and watched and then got the cliff notes essentially from somebody else who went through all the trouble of doing it. And the super fans actually probably did watch the whole thing. Now I feel bad for not being a super fan, and that's also your fault, CIG. You made me feel bad with your 6 hour live stream.
But did you feel bad when you read Kid Crimson?
Oh, I did actually, because upon reading Kid Crimson, I'm like, you know, this doesn't have a lot of space battles. I really should have started with Cassandra's Tears. So yes, I did feel bad, but it was because of my own screw up that time. See, not everything is CIG's fault. So, and that brings me to your new homework, my audience, my students. Cassandra's Tears is another story that you can find on the Robert Space Industries website. I've got it linked in the show notes, and it is in the Spectrum Dispatch section, I guess. The Cassandra's Tears is another story that we'll be talking about in a couple weeks, probably. And so that's going to be the next one on our list that we do a Spectrum analysis on. But for this week, we're talking about Tales of Kid Crimson.
a word of advice before you go read Cassandra's Tears is to actually go in and Google search for Robert Space Industries Cassandra's Tears. It's a lot better than their built-in Spectrum Dispatch search for whatever reason.
Really?
It popped up right away and gave me like all the episodes or issues in order for Kid Crimson. It should do the same for Cassandra's Tears.
Huh. Hang on.
Yeah.
Let me see. Google Cassandra's.
Uh-oh.
No, Robert's Space Industry Cassandra's Tears. You got to put that in there.
And then forget
Otherwise-
to put a space somewhere, and then Google figures it out anyway. Oh, you mean just the links to the various issues?
Yeah.
I see. Yeah, and well,
It
at the
was
bottom
so
of
quick.
each one, they've got the links to all of the future ones. So it's
Which
pretty
on
easy.
my phone didn't work for whatever reason.
Oh. Well, there you
Yes.
go.
I'm too on the go. I can't sit in front of a computer for more than an hour at a time.
I
All
believe
right.
you. I have an
So-
insincere voice.
Let's get to Tales of Kid Crimson. So first of all, spoiler warning. Very briefly, we're going to talk for like 2 minutes with no spoilers, and then it's all bets are off. So, what did you guys think? Did you enjoy it? Was it an enjoyable story overall? How would you rate it against other, various pieces of sci-fi, be them short or long form?
Okay. It was enjoyable as a piece of very good fan fiction.
Okay. So thumbs up. You'd recommend other people to read it?
I don't read fan fiction. Now, this is not a dig at the author. I mean, the author did a great job. With what I'm not sure who wrote it at this point, but the author did
I
a great
looked
job.
for a
with
name.
what
I didn't
was
see a name
available.
on there.
Yeah,
Unfortunately.
and I don't read fan fiction because I have a very hard time with amateur authors. Mostly because I'm one myself, and it feels as painful to me reading it as it would to me if I had written it. That said, they did a good job. I mean, the story was there. They went for some detail. They appeared to have some editing in there that helped out a lot. So I would recommend, if you enjoy Star Citizen, read this because I got through it. You can too.
A glowing recommendation.
I got through it. You can too. I'd love to hear your review of something like Bless Me Ultima. Let's.
You don't want to hear my reviews.
Actually, as a writer, I really did enjoy this story. It provided a lot of characterization that you don't necessarily expect from this kind of writing. It was very personal. The flashbacks didn't feel forced to me. Just the little bits of extra, let's go into the past, let's tell you a little bit about this person.
It had a lot of subtlety.
It did,
think that
and the
was
transitions
very
weren't bad
important.
either.
Yeah.
I think from a writing perspective, this was definitely more professional than fan fiction level stuff.
Yes.
It was more professional than I expected, to be honest.
When I hear
Okay.
fan fiction, I cringe. I'm not gonna lie. But this was actually a really nicely done thing, and
Obviously,
actually the focus.
you have not read Harry Potter and the Methods of Rationality. Because that's the only
I
fan
have
fiction I have
not.
ever read, and I wholeheartedly recommend it to everyone. Therefore, all fan fiction is amazing.
But he
Therefore-
has read 50 Shades of Grey, the Twilight fanfiction. So therefore,
I rescind my previous comments.
I saw this great status on Facebook about Peyton Manning enjoying that because he enjoys choking. Sorry to any
Oh.
fans in here.
That's
Oh.
terrible.
Yeah,
So,
pretty
Oh,
bad.
it's
Anyway.
true, but it's terrible.
I actually thought this story was a really fun ride. It was an adventure story that gets a little bit darker than you really expect. The tone of the story seems like a typical anti-hero story. Like the character himself seems like the parallel at the beginning of the story felt like Malcolm Reynolds from Firefly. Like a
Okay, I got more
badass
of
guy
a-
who commits crimes, but he's a good guy at heart. And then by the end of the story, my opinion of him changed completely. Like, no, he's not a good guy. This is a bad guy fighting badder guys. And that made it really interesting because so few
That's true.
writers take it in that direction. They usually stick to the safe, happy endings, and it just wasn't. It was like
It's not
it
even
was
a
like
traditional
tragedy.
anti-hero.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was like a tragedy more than anything else.
And I don't think that's a bad thing.
No, not at
This is
all.
trying to at least give the idea that no matter how much of a, big bad you may think you are as a pirate or as some part of the universe or as some person that people know, because clearly he's known. People know his
Yeah.
name, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
there may be people who are in arguably legal positions in whatever government, whatever they're doing, that are worse than you. There may be people. There may be people in this universe who will absolutely have the ability to Deus Ex Machina bust through your door with an explosive device and kill you because you have no idea what's going on.
The other thing that this struck is it felt very like a screenplay almost, right? It was written almost like you were... the scenes were written to be as if you were watching like a pulp adventure story. Yeah. Unfold.
It was very episodic, which is good for this kind of, the way they released it and this kind of setup.
And I would like to note that this is something that separates it, at least in my opinion, from a lot of what I would call really good sci-fi writing. Most of the sci-fi that I enjoy reading on a day-to-day basis isn't this brutal and episodic sort of things. This was written as a short story in segments, or at least that's how it feels to me. That's not a bad thing. It's just a different format. I was mentioning to Bridger earlier, it feels to me in some ways like the Dresden Files. It's got that very similar feel of let's get in the character's head, let's do this from this angle of they don't necessarily know what's going on.
It's a first-person retrospective.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the first person, really, the narrator being the main character, really gives you the ability as a writer to just speak in his voice all the time, which is a lot easier than creating a third narrator voice to go over like a third when you're doing like a third person writing. So that I think worked really well for this because the character is so interesting and not even it's snarky. Snarky is probably the right word. The character himself is very snarky, and the writing of certain lines was very good too. There was a line in there. I mean, we were just before the show we were going back over it and we were laughing about various lines. I think the one that got me was that when like the lug at the end was like the main character's hoping that this guy is stupid, and he is stupid, but he's hoping he's stupid enough to give him an opening, and instead he says he didn't though. He was thinking, damn, he hadn't backed down, which was good, but the lumbering gears in his vast empty skull were turning. Like, damn, he's actually thinking. And to visualize this, let's think of his empty skull having just a few giant gears lumbering along.
Yeah,
that's great. That's great. That's the way that you want your character to express himself, I think. Anyway,
it's true. And it was engaging. And the entire story was engaging. It was all written, and it was definitely made well for these little broken up episode bits.
It did keep me entertained for the hour it took to read.
There isn't a whole lot of space combat, not a whole lot of space play going on. There's the scene with the advocacy person and all that, but this was definitely made to be a characterization story. This was meant to be Star Citizen introducing you to the shady underbelly. Perhaps even more so than Separate Law. I'm sure we'll get to that eventually. That was a really great piece as well.
But the scene with the space combat actually did point out some of the things we'll do with upgrades in that in game. I mean, it talks about he's got additional maneuvering thrusters.
Okay, let's go through this. I've got a whole thing. So now we're past the point. Let's start with spoilers. Spoiler warning.
All right.
Okay, Spoilers. If you haven't read Tales of Kid Crimson and you care, this is the spoiler warning. Okay, so... But
it's been out for like 2 years, so if you cared, you'd have read it by now.
Right, you'd think. And we assigned it for homework, so if you haven't read it, you get an F.
Tough titties, people.
So, let's talk about the first chapter. Starts with the bar fight where they basically corner him. He starts out being like essentially helpless or seemingly helpless with a gun pointed to him. Right? Yep. That's an interesting way to introduce your character, and it's one of the things that'll get you kicked off the Fox network if your captain doesn't seem heroic enough. Firefly. So yeah. So we get introduced to him. We kind of get introduced to him as a badass Han Solo, right? That's kind of what he seems like they're going for at the beginning.
Ish. There was a part of this that really kind of got to me, which is when being held at gunpoint with no shield between him and the man with the gun on him, he picks up a bar stool, throws it at his assailant, and beats him. Bullshit.
Listen, you don't understand. These are stupid thugs.
Bullshit.
Isn't this after he already had the other guy get shot in the back because he was holding him between him and the guy?
And then drop that guy to pick up a bar stool and throw it at his assailant, because you could not use one hand to throw a bar stool. That's
In
clear.
interest of disclosure, I have thrown a bar stool. It is possible with some of them.
I'm going to continue my bullshit. I read that, and this is the first thing in the first scene in the book. And I'm like, this is a man who has not done several things who's writing this story. One,
No, hang on. He's still got one of the thugs between him and the gun. He grabs the bar stool and throws it.
The author is someone who has never tried to hold up someone who is completely prone.
Yes.
Yes.
With a knife.
Listen,
That is
this
knife.
guy is awesome. You don't understand how awesome he is.
If he was Clark Kent, I could buy it. But he's not Clark Kent. He is random jackass A at this point to me, who has got the drop on him by two thugs who can't think.
But if you were being introduced to Clark Kent, this might be what it immediately tells you, hey, you don't know anything about this guy except that he can hold some dude up with his right hand and a knife.
Yes.
Yeah.
And throw a stool with his left hand at someone else.
Fair. That or Deadpool. Either way.
It
Good.
could be Deadpool.
Yeah.
If it was Deadpool, though, he'd be talking to himself actively.
And I think,
I'm
honestly,
waiting for that movie.
the narration of this does a good job talking to himself actively. But, yeah, so that, I read that, and right there, the first chapter, I thought, okay, this will be a chore. And I was pleasantly surprised by the rest of the story. But, yeah, just that little fight scene there. I mean, the guy, 50% of bar stools are totally throwable. Thank you, Course Image. I appreciate the backup there. Yeah, the guy, I mean, he's being shot at. He's cowering behind a body, holding a now stabbed and multiply shot guy who is prone and wants to flop over, still in front of him as a shield, with a knife, and then grabs a bar and hurls it. This is League of Legends style of horseshit here.
Hold on, though. We do have a suggestion in Twitch chat.
Low gravity world. If they had mentioned that anywhere,
Yeah.
Colm, if they had mentioned that anywhere, or his bionics or some other stuff, I would buy it. I don't buy it. Everything else seems to be at the normal gravity level.
Listen, cool guys don't look at explosives, and cool guys can pick up bar stools. Okay, I can see that as being a good...
I enjoyed the first chapter except for the actual fight.
So I think the strength of this story is in the mystery of the main plot and not in the details, I think, is where we're going so far.
I'm not arguing that.
I mean, it definitely feels like the fight scenes are movie fight scenes. It's written like a movie plot. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yes. But in a movie, they'd have seen the scene and they'd have cut it.
Aww.
So
they'd have rewritten the whole thing.
Moving on to chapter 2, we basically that chapter's entire purpose is just to introduce us to the main character, right? The nothing else that happens in that chapter matters for the purpose of the rest of the story. So it's sort of a different chapter from the rest, and I agree with you. It's probably the weakest chapter because of it. Because as I said, I think the strength of this is the mystery that's set up in chapter 2 and 3. Where you're like, what's going on here? And then you learn slowly over like I said, there are some subtleties in this, and who the main character is and what he's like is a subtlety that's important. So in chapter 2, we get introduced to Raj, which is actually, what's that race? The Tevarkan? Tevarin, yes.
Tevarin, yeah.
And he's actually, we haven't really met a Tevarin before. I
don't think we did this time either. The Tevarin are far too human. He's not alien.
Yeah, he's definitely written as if he's just a human, but they call him a Tevarin.
I had to go back after reading about Raj later in the story to this chapter and reread it to make sure I knew he was an alien. He was just far, far too human. He was just like any other character in here.
But at the same time,
are you saying that Tevarins aren't people?
I am. I am saying that. Genocide to the Tevarin.
You, sir, are a space racist.
I am a xenophobe.
A space supremacist. So, no, wait a minute. That's a constellation. So,
oh no.
Yes, it is.
The only defense I can have to that is that the Tevarin are a defeated people, and the few that are left have basically been integrated into human society. It wouldn't surprise me if their culture has basically been destroyed, and that their mannerisms and cultural heritage have now just been adopted from human.
I could accept that if elsewhere in the lore, we didn't know that Tavaran have enclaves. While there are some mixed in with people, there are others that are still free and trying to keep their culture alive and bring the war back to
This one is
UE.
mixed in with people.
This one
He
is
is,
definitely
but
mixed in with people.
But I'd say he's still not alien enough. Not raised. I mean, if he was adopted, they could have gone into that in the backstory. You know, Raj, Benny, adopted by humans when he was younger, something like that.
Would that really have stopped you from ranting if they just threw in adopted by humans?
Then I could have said at least he was adopted by humans.
No.
That makes it excusable.
Raised by humans. You have to make it sound
Whatever.
like he's raised by wolves or something.
Raised by wolves.
All right,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
now
Raised
there
by
is
gorillas.
one piece here in chapter 2 before we even get to Raj Benny. I mean, he's got the last name Benny. If that doesn't tell you he was raised by humans, I don't know what will. Raj is like the cultural heritage look back. Like that's the one throwback he's allowed to have to his original culture, his original ethnic name. Okay, so there is one thing here that we get to see. And this is something that Chris Roberts has mentioned a number of times, is that he always talked about how he envisioned criminal types being able to fake their identifications. Like he always liked that concept. Yep. And in this one, of course, our hero, the Kid Crimson, does indeed sort of shift through all of his identification tags and sends one that he knows to be clean on purpose because he's going to a world that has more strict law-abiding citizens in it. And then later he goes to a planet where he doesn't care if the parking people get sent a tag that has, people are looking for. Like, oh, the advocacy is looking for people with this name. Well, if he gives this tag to the parking attendant, they're not going to turn him in because they don't care. They just want money, right? So he knows which tags to send where, so he doesn't use a good, clean tag, essentially, when he goes to a scummy place, and he should save that for when he's at a place that will care who he is and such. So I like that little detail, and I wonder how that's going to play out mechanically. I mean, are you going to be able to steal somebody else's identity and sell on the black market? Is there going to be a rogue bridger out there somewhere in the Star Citizen universe pretending to be me?
I think it's more likely that we're going to have, faking someone else's identity, that would be a cool in-game aspect and one I had never actually considered before you just said it. But I think it's more likely to be, yes, I want identity theft online. Wait, it already is online. I think it's going to be more of the you have a skill or contact, or you can manufacture your own, identi chips or whatever you want to call these things.
And they will require a special mineral that is required in order to make the chip of something, and you have to go to Planet X, which is controlled by the special advocacy something, so you have to steal the cargo while it's en route from an armored truck on something.
Or you
something.
At least it's not SOE, because if it was, then it would be only available in the cash shop, and it would drain a resource available only in the cash shop per second to keep it active.
Oh yeah, no, it would your fake identity would fail after 24 hours unless you re-up with your stupid fake money points.
But when I was reading it, I thought that is a great use for a module in the what do they call that thing? The RISC computer.
Oh, the MobiGlass.
You keep talking about the MobiGlass. I call mine a Moto 360, but a MobiGlass. Yeah. It'd be a great module in that where you could have a blank card and slot it in the MobiGlass, and out pops the new identity chip or the new card, which I'm surprised isn't part of the MobiGlass actually, but we won't go into that. Maybe it's something you load in there to tell the MobiGlass who you are before it does anything, but I could see that as being a really cool little feature for the in-game stuff you'll do with faking identities. And having maybe blank cards are so thoroughly controlled that having one is contraband that gets you arrested or killed.
Yeah, that would be true.
Possible.
I mean, just by having more than one identicard on him, if he was ever caught, bam, that's it.
Yeah,
if his ship was searched, he would just go straight to prison because you're supposed to only have the one. So
he'd be arrested and then spend a lot of time in a holding cell, and then with the inefficiencies of the justice, getting.
So for those people, because there may be some people that are listening that didn't know what's going on. So in the very first chapter, very briefly, we had our hero confronted by two little thugs from a guy that was looking for money from him. He says he basically turns the everything. He turns, what is the phrase where he turns the tides? He gets better of them instead of them getting the better of him. He beats them up and says, "I'll pay your boss, don't worry. Just tell him not to send you guys anymore," blah, blah, blah. So in chapter 2, we get to see him hunting for essentially prey.
Yes.
That is really interesting because now we get to see, okay, he's actually clearly a criminal. He's watching a drunk guy go off to his ship and, like, I'll just follow him, threaten him, and take his stuff. But do you feel like he's actually gonna shoot this guy if he tries to run away? Because he threatens to.
He threatens to, but then when the guy does run, doesn't. Because the guy acts like he's going to run, and then missiles kill him from another
Somebody
source.
else.
From a secret ship.
So, but you
Cloaking.
get the impression
It doesn't
from
exist.
you get the impression from the inner dialogue that he's not actually going to shoot the guy, which is weird. Well, actually, once he figured out what's in the cargo, he's going to shoot the guy. But
Yeah, he was going to blow him up.
yeah,
And he has a
hates
reputation for killing
slavers.
people.
He hates
But
slavers so much.
here is
To a
plot hole
fault.
number 2. Other than the fight scene, plot hole number 2. There was no way that the main protagonist or antagonist would know that he would hunt down this particular guy and be in that bar at that time, and et cetera, et cetera. These series of events are... Now, you could maybe argue that Raj hired this guy, left him there, and then tried to send him to broadcast it so thoroughly he had to take... It was too easy a target. But that kind of thing is really questionable to me when it comes to any of these plots. If it was random happenstance that got him into this, I could have accepted the story from this point a lot more.
Well, we do know that Raj was there on that thing, potentially surveilling him and saying, he's in that bar, I want you to go in here and act, and act drunk or what have you.
If the drunkard had talked about how valuable his cargo was, I'm back on board,
Well,
but he didn't. He
but-
was just an asshole.
But that's just it. They know. They know that he basically just looks for drunks.
That's
That
true.
could be sort of a
But he's in a
calling.
bar. There are a lot of drunks.
And all you
I've been
have
to
to
bars.
do...
I've drunk.
But that's just it. All they have to do is make sure they know where he's going to be.
But
To
did
some
they
degree.
know? Did they know which bar he was going to go in? Were they to have that guy there at that
See.
time in that
He
place?
could have walked in.
But that also suggests that they might have planted people at multiple bars.
Okay, you can go.
I
with
mean,
that. On
you're
a
talking about a
planet.
giant criminal empire. You know
Yeah.
the guy's going to be on the station, plant like 3 undependable drunks with a semi-valuable cargo at 3 different bars.
And then knowing that there wouldn't be another random drunk in there who looked better because he did brag about his cargo.
Yep.
Also, that argues that there are multiple ships with a crap ton
Well,
of
to be
frozen
fair,
corpsicles in them.
the drunk calls attention to himself, right? He
does.
He gets up and said, "I called you a cheat." He tries to start a fight, and then the bartender forces him to leave.
What I'm saying is the odds that the actual person that Kid Crimson is looking for being in that bar, in addition to this other drunk, are probably quite high. You can't control for that as the criminal mastermind that you are. So why would you create this plot as opposed to setting him up in some other way, like delivering a cargo to his ship that is full of slaves that makes it obvious he's being set up by somebody.
They waited until Kid Crimson followed somebody, then they beamed the slaves into his cargo.
Hey, Enterprise pops in, beams them in. So, yeah.
No, you're right. That is one. Upon a second read through, that is probably the worst piece is how do you get him into this mess? Everything else makes sense for the most part from this point forward, but how do you get him to start this rabbit hole?
This fulcrum in the story is way too set up, I guess is the way to put it. It's not obvious that you could pull this off, and there are direct action
Now, hang on.
ways
Here's
it
another
could have
possibility.
Mm-hmm.
What if Kid Crimson did stumble into this? Raj is on the planet trading slaves, and one of his pilots is chased by Kid Crimson. Raj sees it happen, but
Raj
thought
already
strikes him.
had it set up.
Not
Remember
necessarily.
It's not necessarily true.
When the kid in the slave pod thingy is talking about who captured him, it was Kid Crimson. Raj had already planned that out, but there was no way he could
Right. Okay, so let me back up again. I see what you're saying.
Kid Crimson would encounter the slave.
So the whole point of this is that the fake Kid Crimson trafficking in slavers, that was supposed to lure in the real Kid Crimson. However it happened. it's possible that Raj didn't plan for him to find out in this specific way. All he did was have the actual Kid Crimson surrounded by the laser burn and his friends wait for the real Kid Crimson to show up because he knew he would eventually, right?
But Raj needed him to show up at by a certain time, which was this whole Citizen Day thing to take out and
Not
get the
necessarily.
new identity
I mean,
and blah, 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 blah,
he
blah.
could have gone after him as any other time. That one just happened to be convenient. I contend.
But as a criminal mastermind, I'm going to contend that Raj had better options to directly involve the guy he wanted to set up. And it seems that XSplit Broadcaster has gone down.
Oh, what? No, it isn't.
Oh, there we go. We're back.
Okay.
It's just switching from one scene to another.
Okay, so
for the people that may be really confused, that didn't read or are having trouble remembering, so
Tales of Plot Holes.
That's what it is. So
all right,
the overall story here is that our hero, the protagonist, is essentially set up to think that the senator from Terra, Senator Harrington, was in fact a famous slaver named Caro who runs a big underground slaving ring. And the point is, Kid Crimson is supposed to get so incensed when he finds out that Senator Harrington is actually Caro that he goes and takes out Senator Harrington, and then Kid Crimson is blamed for that attack. And so all this evidence is planted so that Kid Crimson specifically, if he looks into it, will find out that Senator Harrington is Caro. And the first piece of evidence is that the guy that is calling himself Kid Crimson is, just a fake Kid Crimson is supposed to give him the first piece of information. And that's where this all starts, essentially.
He's told that Caro hired fake Kid Crimson.
Mm-hmm.
And then a dude kills fake Kid Crimson.
And the same
and
dude
then that dude shows up with the senator a few minutes later.
That's where it all gets. And that was the one piece that I had that I wanted to get. Like, really, they knew he was going to see that specific piece on TV. It was so brief.
The author even mentions it. It was happenstance that he saw it in the thing. There's no way they knew.
But that's why it's so perfect, don't you see? I contend that they have some really good hackers, and no matter what he was watching, they would have spliced it in such that he believed it was. I don't know. You're right.
So it's all tracking his mobiGlas all the time. This is actually a story about incredibly, incredibly effective surveillance.
I could go with that. That I could buy it. They hacked every TV he could possibly see at the same time, and only those TVs, not the feed. Anyway, the whole plot point of getting him involved in the first place was really weak and questionable to me. But once he's involved,
everything works if you don't. Here's the thing: the story works perfectly the first time you read it, because at that point you don't know that this is all a plot. So you assume that he's just happened to run into some slavers, but it didn't But upon rereading it is when it sort of falls apart a little bit. But there are little pieces here and there that kind of make it stand out. So there you go. So we get to chapter number 3, and chapter number 3 is where we get the fact that he's realized now that he's got a cargo of slaves, and he wants to go and find out more information / kill / torture the guy who was trafficking him, the drunk guy, and then the drunk guy gets blown out of nowhere by a very highly stealthed ship, and he can't find it, and then all of a sudden the advocacy agent Raina Quell shows up out of nowhere, theoretically tipped off by Raj or somebody else that there, and that's what she says later, is she was given a tip that there were a cargo of slaves nearby. Sentient traffickers.
Random note here. Yes. Drunk guy was driving a Misk Fiera, which I am convinced is a space Trabi.
Also,
I feel like that's like the Dodge Dart of spaceships.
This also points back to the whole plot hole thing. If the random ship that fires missiles at the guy was there waiting for that guy, they had to know he picked that guy up and blah, 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 blah.
No, you just follow him. You just follow him. It all works fine if you just follow the hero 24/7 without him noticing. And at the same time have him be badass and awesome and aware of everything. Where was I going with this? Anyway.
Okay, so advocacy agent pops in and the freelancer takes off.
Now, here's the thing. The advocacy agent at this point says, you have 1 minute, and he tries to escape, right? Now, there's a quote in chapter 3 She was fighting for a missile lock, and I used every trick in the book to prevent it. Unquote. What tricks might these be? How can I use them right now in Arena Commander? Because I can't.
I don't think you can, but I'm gonna guess it's along the lines of the signature flares. He talks about additional maneuvering thrusters all over his ship, bouncing around on that. I'm guessing he was using everything he could to break electronic lock on him.
Yeah, and it almost, I mean, from that sentence, it sounds like he's like in some kind of a furball with her, like he's trying to stay away from being in front of her so she can't get a lock, but at the same time he has to be traveling like thousands of clicks to get to the next wormhole over the course of this dance and dodge. Maybe he's bouncing between asteroids in order to avoid, like there just happens to be a path of asteroids between him and the target.
Well, it depends on her ship. If her ship is slower than his, he could probably, as long as he can get the distance he needs and to start out enough range. It doesn't mention in the story how far apart they are is the problem. So you don't know how easy it is for him to get there. But benefit of the doubt, they were at extreme engagement range to begin with, and he gets away because he's faster than she is.
We know they used missiles, so based on Arena Commander theory crafting in the stats page,
2 kilometers.
And I'll stop right there.
That means the Freelancer is invulnerable because he drives a Freelancer.
Currently it's
and that makes him
true.
awesome. That makes my Freelancer more awesome. So now they reference add thrusters, and I am assuming that means additional thrusters or like additional maneuvering thrusters. Probably he calls
it sounds
stealth or hidden add thrusters.
Like a one-time shot maneuvering thruster, the add thruster.
Like a piece
or
of your
maybe
hull
they're not one-time
bounces
shot.
off like, haha, you thought I only had 8 thrusters, but I actually have 16. Wahaha! Like,
it looks like you're flying a Freelancer miss, but actually those are just 2 engine pods that fold over.
Yeah.
That would be fun.
All
but
right,
if flying
so
the miss, yeah. Go ahead.
So he's trying to get away, and he actually uses in a pretty cool way. He gets there, and he talks about how he uses his knowledge of the fact that they have a really shitty turning radius in the police cruisers to get past them, and then he uses an EMP
Sounds like
bomb.
cruisers are big, by the way.
I'm sorry.
Well, it sounds like
the cruisers are big, by the way.
Maybe.
Well, I'm wondering if
I guess the
cruiser
government doesn't
isn't
want to
like
spring
an
for more than
adventure.
4 maneuvering thrusters
Yeah.
on their cruiser.
Yeah, well, the fuel's expensive, man. You got to watch out for that cost. It adds up. I mean, crime is cheaper than fuel.
You mentioned now that you mention it, they called it a cruiser. Now I was thinking police cruiser as in like the police car, like a single or 2-seater, like a Cutlass level fighter, but maybe they mean actual cruiser, like bigger than a Javelin police cruiser.
I can't believe that, because there's only one agent mentioned on it, and he's able to get away. No fighters are scrambled, nothing like that.
So probably just does mean like a Cutlass level, like either an Avenger or something else.
Yeah, I was thinking an Avenger or something like it. But again,
That's got a bad turning radius. Cutlass can turn.
that's all it can do.
Maybe it's
watching it right now.
The government version. Yeah, that's true. It's all that happens.
The Caterpillar.
Sorry,
all they
Cutlass
fly is
fans.
Caterpillars.
Now, the note I had
there
here
you
was, going back through the story a second time, are the pieces of the story that make more sense, knowing how it ends? And Calathulu has already said, nope, all makes less sense now.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, this was my first read-through of it. I'd never read the Kid Crimson stuff before. So when I was reading it, I had some things that were questionable in my mind, and then when I got to the end of it, I went back and reviewed all those questionable notes to me and went, fuck. But, I'm sorry, I got us the adult rating, I'm sorry.
Woo-hoo!
Now, the one thing I noticed on there was at the end of this, where he gets away and he makes a dive for the wormhole, he launches an EMP missile out. So he's showing he's not really willing to blow up civilians who aren't really involved, but he is willing to inconvenience or cause some electronics damage that won't kill anybody.
Mhm.
So again, we're back from that hard-bitten pirate to Malcolm Reynolds style, or
Pirate with
that
a
kind
heart
of
of
thing.
gold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Also a horror for reference, but yeah, we'll go.
Yeah, details.
That's chapter 9, people. You'll get there.
Yeah. All right. So chapter 4 happens, and he basically is trying to figure out what's going on. He defrosts, I think is the term that they use. He defrosts some slaves and
Which
tries
is why
to
I say
interview them.
corpsicles. I think corpsicles is a term we need to get involved in Star Citizen.
Except they're not
Frozen
dead.
slaves. It doesn't matter. Frozen slaves are corpsicles.
Okay. Yeah. Sentient trafficking, too highbrow for us. We're just going to call them slavers and corpsicles. Okay.
Corpsicles. Yep.
So, a little background here that humanizes our anti-hero a little bit. We learn that this guy Clay on the asteroid thing was somebody that he was supposed to collect money from. He was a thug, presumably working for like organized crime. And now we learn that his background is essentially worked as a thug, figured out that he was way too smart to be a thug, and then went out on his own. And was good enough and smart enough to make it on his own against all these criminal empires. So there you go.
To be fair, he was a citizen before he was a thug.
That's right.
Yes.
So he was smart enough to get citizenship. That means he either passed his equivalency or he was military.
No, I think Clay is the one that they
Clay
in
was
this
the
sentence
citizen.
that they in this chapter that they represent his citizenship had been stripped, his family were gone because he had made some bad choices and he had no money left.
Spiraled. Yeah.
And he, so Kid Crimson shows up, supposed to collect from him, and then found out that this pathetic excuse for, a person, he sympathizes with him. And instead of, trying to collect, this may be the moment when Kid Crimson says, I don't want to be a thug anymore. I want to make my own decisions, and decides to help this guy out and go on his own, right? So I think that seems to be, he said, I didn't end up collecting, and over the years did what I could to help him out. So that kind of humanizes our anti-hero a little bit, brings him back towards the Malcolm Reynolds Heart of Gold type guy, right?
Or as Coleman Twitch chat puts it, the Robin Hood. Although I don't really see him as robbing from the rich to steal from the poor.
No, he robs from drunks and gives to himself.
Robbing from the drunks to give to the not drunks.
Yeah.
I think you could build a business plan around that.
Absolutely.
We call it a bar. All right.
Oh, no.
All right. So we learn a little bit here. This is where we learn about the fake Kid Crimson, right? We learn a little bit more. He does a little research. He does the interviews. He gets a little hot-headed, and then the kid comes back and says, "Sorry, buddy, I didn't mean to lose my cool, but here's the most important piece of information I forgot about, but now I remember."
Yeah.
So
and then then you find out that he becomes aware now someone is a fake him. So now he's going to go tearing off again right into Raj Benny's plan. He's going to go tearing off back to Earth or New Terra. Was it New Terra?
I think it's Terra. I think is where
Terra.
Terra.
Yeah.
Tearing off back to Terra, which is weird to me because Terra is Earth in most stories, but tearing off back to Terra to take care of this masquerading Kid Crimson.
Yeah, and he does have some pieces of information to go on. He knows where the kid was picked up. He knows that the name of the dealer was Kendrick, right? So he manages to. So he just says, "I'm just gonna cruise these bars until I hear or find somebody with that name. Like I'm gonna ask around."
True.
But it sounds like he might be a little bit out of touch with the bar scene because what did he say? I think that there was a line in here. After a couple hours, I realized something stank about me. Maybe they thought I was a cop, or the scowl on my face told them I wasn't out to have a good time. Like, he's there to kill slavers, and he's like, "Hey, man, I'm looking for some drugs. You got any drugs?" Like, no.
I want to score some drugs, fellow kids.
Neon, that's the one that they were calling.
Fellow kids. Because that's a way to build a reputation in a bar.
Well, that's
Greetings, fellow humans.
Yeah, Kids in the Hall. They had, I think, or maybe it was The Whitest Kids You Know. Have a scene where they pop in and the guy's in his 40s and he's in high school. He goes, "I want to buy some drugs, fellow kids." Everyone just walks away.
And then the other thing is they use some interesting slang in this. The corpsicle that he defrosted. Said, I was on the cruise looking for a nice piece of fine. I think fine meaning fine lady, pretty lady, whatever you want to call it, babe, whatever the kids are calling it these days. So that's the first piece of interesting, and then neon being the drug of choice.
Yeah.
There's some interesting, you got to learn this terminology if you want to be in the Star City universe and be full immersion mode.
And you have to use it in your day-to-day speech, so people get on that.
Yeah.
When you see your wife or girlfriend, or just a girl you meet at the restaurant, tell her she's a nice piece of fine.
Yes. They will take that. Just don't tell your boss that. That's probably bad.
It depends on your boss.
Poor choices.
And he obviously sees himself as not a kid anymore, because later when he follows those two kids looking for drugs and he finds Kendrick, he says, "Bounce, kids. Let the grown-ups talk."
Yes, he does.
He's much more mature. Much more mature. So, so then we see this whole thing, and he says, "Oh, yeah, I'll put you in touch with Kid Crimson." He meets Kid Crimson, basically makes the kid wet himself and says,
Yes.
"Yeah, who are you, man? Take one guess." Like they love to end these on like sort of cliffhangers. Like I gotta know more, and that's that's good. It's good.
Well, they
Good
want you
method,
coming
like
back
you
for
said, the
more next
serialized
episodes.
method.
Yep.
Like if you were reading this and it was just one long thing, you'd be like, well, that seemed weird to end like that, and then start right at the next thing. All right, so that was chapter 5 right there, right? So we're going on to chapter 6. This is the
Let's
part
speed this
where
up.
he learns a little bit more about. He basically interviews fake Kid Crimson, gets the name Karo, and then the kid is just axe, just gone, right?
Yeah.
So-
Again, weird that they'd only shoot. From just reading it the first time, weird they would only shoot the kid and not the guy interviewing him until well after he started to run.
And they
But,
had
yeah,
to. One note that I had is they had to orchestrate the fight between Laserburn
Yes.
and Kid in such a way that Kid Crimson thinks that he has just barely avoided these hardened mercenaries, but at the same time not accidentally kill Kid Crimson. Like if somebody misaims and actually kills him, and Raj comes out and be like, "Guys, what the hell? You just blew the whole plan." So that was another small piece. But the other thing that occurs to me is in the previous chapter, I forgot a note that I had written down here. When he first shows up and meets Kid Crimson, fake Kid Crimson, he has no qualms, just mercilessly murders 2 thugs and a drug dealer in no time. Just like, bam, 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 shoot, 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 kill, 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 knife, knife, knife. And just like no qualms at all, didn't even have any second thoughts, didn't even care. So he's like, I gotta save these poor kids from the slavers, but these guys, they're thugs standing in my way of getting to the slavers. They work for the slavers, they're as good as dead.
They
It's
chose that
definitely a
line.
self-interest story.
Yeah, he's
There's
got
no
a very
question
black
there.
and white line. Like, if you're above this line, I care.
But he earlier had no qualms, stabbing a guy. No guarantee that guy lived from the very first chapter.
No, it's
So,
okay.
there you
He'll
go.
get to a med station. He told him, get your friend to a med station. We'll come back to
He
that.
did say that.
I mean, maybe this is part of it that we're actually missing, just as a thought. There is a lot of wanton violence in this. There's no question there.
Wonton
Is-
violence.
yes,
I like that.
violence
Chinese
against
Now-
violence against Chinese food.
When we start looking at the future here, maybe this kind of violence because of med stations and those kind of things is considered less drastic. Maybe that's the universe that this author is writing for, a place where indeed blowing off somebody's finger or shooting them or stabbing them doesn't mean death necessarily.
It
Once
doesn't
you shoot
even
them in the
mean
back
you
of the
don't
head.
get your finger back. I mean, you'll get your finger back,
Yeah.
really, right? Everybody's
So
got really good
there's
health
sort
insurance.
of a question. There's clearly that point where if you blow somebody's head off or you shoot them in a couple of very specific places, they're dead. But it would seem that just overall violence is performed in this universe with a much quicker trigger finger. I'm
Well,
not sure if that's intentional social
is that the same
commentary
over
or it
all
just
of the
happens to be
stories?
easy.
Or is it just this one?
It is. It is largely the same across all the stories, though I would note in some of them there is more intent to kill.
Yes.
Just outright kill, not wound. Just boom, we want you dead.
But
kind
does
of
that
thing.
is that just because the stories they're telling, they try to give you the drama of the violent
Yes.
underbelly of the world, of the universe?
See, that's a good question.
Wait. The Info Runner story. I'm trying to remember the name of it now.
I don't remember the name of it either, but
okay.
there was an Info
But-
Runner story.
But they didn't go in for the big violence until she got involved with hardened criminals. Then it was, they weren't, there wasn't a lot of that, though there were some opportunities for it in the story. So I'd say that it argues that normal people aren't really involved like this. It's because these stories deal with, lowlifes and scum.
Hardened
That's
criminal.
why you see more of it. Yeah.
Was that Dateline Sesson?
Might have been.
No, that was the one about the reporter.
Oh,
I've
that's right.
read too
yeah.
many of these.
The first run, Orbital Supermax, or
It
First
might have been
run.
the first run.
First
There-
run.
the first
that
run?
was it.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it was her first run.
There you go. I haven't read that one yet. I'm going to get to that too.
It's good.
You should.
It's
It
not
was very
bad.
good.
All
It's
right.
probably my favorite of all of them so far.
So, Chapter 6 is the big fight with Laserburn and his cronies, and of course, this is the piece where he just happens to see Laserburn, the guy that he was fighting, the guy that supposedly works for Caro, talking to Senator Harrington on the TV. And, of course, we find out later that that little piece was stitched into the broadcast, but it was not something that actually took place. So, that itself makes you wonder how the hell did they get that to happen and make sure that he was looking at the TV at that particular moment. Maybe they took over the TV when he was in there, but then they had to guarantee
But-
that he wasn't distracted at that exact moment.
Twitch chat had a great suggestion for this. Let me scroll up a little bit to try and find it. It was a while back, but it was the opportunity for Star Citizen to cross over with Watch Dogs and make sure this kind of gameplay is possible.
There you go.
It could be a thing.
It
mean,
could be a thing. There, IGC Blaze is the one who threw that one out there. So thank you, IGC Blaze.
So, and in the next chapter is all about him, like, basically planning his assassination, right? He's about to do everything that Raj Benny wants him to do. He's about to go through. He's convinced now that Senator Harrington is Caro. He's buying a gun. He's ready to go and do it. He's already got a plan and a backup plan in place in order to do this.
And he buys a railgun to accomplish his goals. But I thought that the railguns were capital ship systems. Was I incorrect, I guess is the question there.
Well, railguns can be many different sizes.
Well, but you can't get them on smaller ships, was what I read many, many moons ago. That's why the Idris has the spinally mounted railgun, and you don't find railgun weapon systems on other ships. But that said, if handheld railguns with portable power packs or whatever are a thing, then that's cool. I would be surprised to find them very small and giantly massive.
But not in between.
But not in between.
There goes XSplit.
Or maybe the ones that you have that are very small are actually not particularly effective against anything that's not squishy.
Okay, all right. So it's the flechette round kind of thing where it's basically plastic and it makes into ground beef anyone it hits.
Maybe it's just like a plastic round with metal rail along the side to do the propulsion or something.
Okay, I'd go with that. So there's a casing on this railgun. That's awesome.
Yeah, maybe that's what we're looking at, is some sort of like pseudo railgun that's not really effective against ships. Otherwise, I think you're right. We'd be seeing them all the time.
Yeah, because something that could accelerate a slug of nickel metal iron to half the speed of light would be an excellent sniping weapon that I would use always and on every ship.
But
it is also worth noting that he's talking about using the railgun and then getting away.
Yes.
Railguns do not strike me as subtle when used in atmosphere. So there's got to be something about this weapon we don't know.
36 millimeters of titanium at 3,000 meters. I mean, so he's basically got the equivalent.
It's an anti-tank round.
Right. It's a future version of a Barrett 50 caliber, right? Like a big 50 caliber sniper rifle.
Because Barrett couldn't punch through a Tiger. This one could, comparatively speaking. I mean, it's...
Well, no. 36 millimeters is not enough to go through. 70. You need like 75 or 80 millimeters to go through
half a
tank
Tiger
armor in World War II anyway. So, that's what I'm saying. It's like a 50 caliber round. It's the kind of thing you'd use in an airplane. Not a cannon.
All right, so...
Or actually, no, that's a little bigger than a cannon, isn't it? Cannon rounds were like 20 millimeters.
Yeah.
It's a little bigger than a cannon
millimeters. 36 millimeters, you're talking about like the size of a watch face. At that point.
So what they wanted to do
as your wrist when you get down to
if it hits him at any point, even in his toe, much like the Auk, he's going to die. I think is the idea.
Well done with the Counter-Strike reference there. Good.
Lovely.
And I think the other idea here is that the gun itself is very expensive, so it's a very high-end weapon. That is what they imply. Specifically, he said, remember that when I tell you the price? And he's like, oh, it's worth it. So now he's got the tool, he's got the plan, everything's going well, and then bam, Reyna shows up, the advocacy agent that's been tracking him this whole time. She managed to track him down, so obviously he wasn't being careful, but also they mentioned that she's very good. So I think it's very easy to say that, yes, he maybe was a little bit sloppy, but also she's really good.
There's something worth noting here, and that's that Raj definitely wants him to have the opportunity to kill the senator.
Mm.
So no matter how badass Kid Crimson thinks he is here, they're letting him get away.
Yes.
He has to try to make the kill, so they're letting him get away every time. So no matter how much his self-narration is saying, I was so good at this, I, did this in the crowd till I was sure nobody was tailing me, and I'm sure I was alone and all that. Bullshit. He's trying to be slippery, and they're just like, hey, look at this guy, look at this jackass running around. Well, we don't want to kill him yet.
Yeah,
we bugged him some time ago. Now he is known to other people, including the advocacy agent, so he has a reputation. But he's not as good as his self-narration, the self-serving self-narration is.
And it is worth noting that much of this story, in fact, just is self-narration.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's his
We're
point of view
punching
as
plot
he does
holes in
things.
this, but it's all self-narration. His perspective could be incredibly skewed, which is part of the beauty of this story, by the way.
Mhm.
That they really did take, the Han Solo-esque, like, I'm a badass, I'm strutting around, I shot first in the bar character, and allowing them to try to tell this story in which they kind of lose.
Yeah, well, he definitely does as we get to the next chapter. But so we get introduced to Reyna Quell in this one, who's the advocacy agent who busted
Yes.
some other guy that he recognized. Like, oh, that was you. And what was it here?
You seem far too incompetent.
Hurricane Wilcox, great name. Hurricane Wilcox was just like that. Well, until I shot him.
This reminds me a lot of World War II movies with the nicknames they have in there.
Yeah, like
All we need
like
now
call
is a
signs.
text, and we're set.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things that occurred to me is we're introduced to her, and in science fiction, often the problem with a lot of science fiction and fantasy writing, going all the way back to Tolkien, is that female characters are not written terribly well, mostly because it's always been, male-dominated genres. And you can point out many examples of famous stories. I mean, I've been reading a lot of Asimov lately, and there's very few female characters at all. And
Yes.
most of them are just there to serve as love interests for, some of the other male
I
characters.
want to take a quick moment and insert something into this conversation that's a rabbit trail from this.
Okay.
There's a title that I just finished reading about 2 nights ago called The Wesleyan Anthology of Science Fiction.
Okay.
And it is a collection of short stories, many of which by early female and modern age feminist writers.
Okay.
It is incredible. It is one of the best collections of sci-fi short stories you could ever have sitting next to your toilet so you can read one in a sitting.
But the trouble is, you just said feminist, and so Glenn Beck is going to boycott our show.
Oh, I'm sure he will. But I'm telling you guys, this is an incredible collection of work. Some of the best short stories I have ever read. Wesleyan Anthology of Science Fiction.
Okay.
Pick it up. Have some well-written female characters, often from female writers. It's worth reading.
And Bridger, I was going to add, if you ever read any Heinlein, speaking of terribly written female characters, they exist. Women exist to Heinlein the same way women existed to Hemingway, and it's not a positive note for character development.
Uh-oh.
Ah, yes. Stream is going derping right now. I can't figure out how to get it back. Oh, there we go. I'm back. You guys
There
are
we
back.
are.
We don't need you back.
Uh-oh.
It's
Yeah,
taking a while to load.
Hey,
I was
as
just
long
going to
as-
say,
as-
I will write down with my Star Citizen pen and my Star Citizen stationery the what was it? Gyno something something? What was it? The Wesleyan?
Wesleyan Anthology of Science Fiction.
Oh, you have a knife. That's how quaint.
As a agent who has no romantic interest in the protagonist, has no interest outside of he's someone to capture.
He's a scumbag.
Yeah, the character comes off as competent. She's very eager to do her job and do it well, and that transcends gender. All three of those things. Could they have written the same character as male? Yes. So there's nothing in her other than she being she that defines her as being female with her attitude or actions. But at the same time, at no point with this character is there a point where that would be true, where you'd have to define her, because there is no love interest between this character and.
I would argue
protagonist.
slightly
There's the
differently.
laughing.
There
comments.
is the comment where it
So
seems
the
like
subtle flirting.
yeah, he's trying to play the Harrison Ford, handsome scoundrel card. And in other
Yes.
stories, over the course of like, oh, he's actually right. Maybe he actually really is chasing a bad guy and we really are on the same team. And then they wind up becoming a love interest, right? That's
No,
what
I
it's
did-
set up to be. And yet she
Yeah.
resists because she's an officer of the
Eager
law.
and earnest.
And
Yeah.
he's not, obviously. So
Yeah.
she's not the, oh, I'm just going to fall for his charm. She's like, no, yeah, you're charming, fine. I laughed a couple of times, but I'm still doing my job, and you're still going to jail if this doesn't work out, right? She
Can I
does
hear your
not fall for
impersonation
it.
again? I want to hear that
Ew.
impersonation.
Ew.
Thank you. You're either
I just
you're either
need
Mrs.
more
Doubtfire,
castles and-
or you're an advocacy agent.
No, I was a poorly written female character is what I was going for.
Oh, okay. Well done.
Before anybody gets mad.
Yeah. So
All
she
right.
wasn't bad from the standpoint of her gender. She was not poorly written. She was not a bad character. Yes, I noticed the subtle byplay of flirting, and I thought that was just to establish that he was kind of a guy who can't relate to women, but that's a separate issue.
It's definitely a minor character role.
Yes.
I think attempting to interpret this as a major character role would be a mistake. She was a plot device.
Yeah.
They needed an advocacy agent in there. They needed to be able to establish that the advocacy agent believed him. This was the choice of how to do that.
But I like that it wasn't his charm that convinced her. Instead, it was the actual evidence that he was able to convince her with, right? His charm only got him so far to get her to potentially look at things, but actually none of that worked. It wasn't until people started shooting at them that she decided, oh, maybe I should look into this, right? That was the point at which it mattered.
It's true.
And the other question that comes in is, so in the scene where they're in the police station, they're being shot at and all that, they are not killing the advocacy agent, and they're not killing the kid, Kid Crimson.
Ethan.
So why are they keeping her alive though? Because all she is a liability to Raj's plan, and yet they're still not trying to kill her, not going out of their way to kill her like you'd expect them to.
That's not necessarily true. The guy's trying to pull a shotgun out of his cloak or his coat. Yeah. We don't know who's
his
aiming
trousers. Okay, good
Kid
point.
Crimson makes the assumption that he's aiming it at him. It could be an intention to kill the advocacy agent and take him from the advocacy agent.
Or just sort of let him get away again, right?
Yeah.
I mean, whatever is being done, it's not necessarily, they're trying to kill him, because clearly they don't want to kill him until they can reasonably frame him for...
But as a plot device, she is the reason why he doesn't just go off herring and kills the senator as expected, or the congressman. So getting rid of her is necessary for Raj's plan to continue. The carefully laid plan that has existed since Chapter 2. So I was a little surprised that she didn't die then and there, but then later on when Raj comes in and talks about why they had to kill her, why she had to die, why couldn't he just do as expected? It kind of pulled it back together. So.
All right, so then Chapter 9 is where we get the M. Night Shyamalan twist here, which
he was dead all
along.
Like
I said, it worked really well up until you go back and reread it. is the fact that they discovered together that through just doing more research that the thing is, he was convinced by the little evidence that they planted. She was saying, no, obviously you're lying to get out of this, and he has to dig deeper to prove it to her. He's willing and ready and able to believe because he wants to kill a slaver. That's all there is to it. And he has to prove it to her, and it's only when he digs deeper that he finds out that this is actually a setup, which is actually, it works quite well. It's the getting him into this whole mess that was pretty bad. So...
Yeah. And I got a little annoyed when they went back to the police station, because who in their right mind would do that? But then it turns out he had a one-of-a-kind item you can't get elsewhere, which I look forward to acquiring in Star Citizen.
Yeah, I want to be one of the people who's a special exception allowed to wield a Vanduul blade. Right?
So I'm curious if they're going to go back and write that story. So we find out why Kid Crimson has this. Maybe right after he escapes, the whole PTSD flashbacks. The reason for that he has for being a slave himself. We didn't cover that in our narration so far, but I think that would be an excellent story for the author to take on after this. And I promise I will read it if you're listening out there.
That's another
you
tale
might be cursing
of Kid
my
Crimson,
name,
right? It's
but
a prequel.
I promise I'll read it.
It's a prequel.
Yes.
I do wonder, are these stories, because there are a number of them, and almost all of them are open-ended. They could keep going on that author. Are these setups? Are we looking at a situation where these authors were basically auditioning to write material like you see for StarCraft? There are whole novels for that book that actually advance the plot. If you don't read them, you miss quite a bit.
To be fair, there's also an entire Korean musical or Broadway musical style for StarCraft. A buddy of mine got dragged out there to see it, And he texted me that night and said, Ben, this is the weirdest thing I've ever witnessed.
I'm imagining, I know it's not Korean, but I'm imagining like a kabuki theater version of StarCraft in my head right now.
It would be just terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, one of the things here that they go back to get is he went back to get a Vanduul blade, right? The thing that he uses in the very first scene. And
Which
she
should
mentions,
mark him for death.
Yeah, she mentions,
Yeah.
I thought only the Vanduul could have these. Any other species would be marked and hunted. And he says, special exception. And then she says, I gotta hear that story. I'm wondering, is he just being sarcastic? He's like, I'm good enough to outrun the Vanduul. Or is he I helped them out and they gave me a blade and they allowed me to keep it as part of a special exception? Like, which one of those is true?
It
Other
could
question.
be machismo, but...
How do they know?
Because they have
The
trackers
Vanduul
on
know.
every blade. I think it's
All the humans look alike.
seen. You know, they have feelers out. Like they have spies within all the human societies. Like if you ever see a Vanduul blade, report it to me.
Again, with details not mentioned, he has it tattooed across his forehead in Vanduul text. They don't mention it anywhere because it's so normal to have Vanduul characters tattooed on your body in the future.
No way. It's like Chinese characters on your arm now that say, I'm a fat American.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
There is that question, though. Are these things that were intended as just little details, or are we actually looking, with some of these stories, at a continuation?
Mhm.
Are we looking at the ability for these authors to write prequels and sequels to a bunch of these things?
That would be really interesting to see, because I did read some of the World of Warcraft books, for example, that explain some of the stuff that's going on in the backstory, and they weren't like masters of fantasy writing, but the fact that they discussed things that were happening in a world which I was actually playing in, that was enough to make them interesting, I thought. And they were like, oh, they talk about this specific plot. I've been there. I know what that looks like. Like, you know, it's just weird. It's like if something took place, you know, in my hometown almost. Like, and then they described all the places in my hometown. I'd be like, oh, I know all about that. Oh, it's amazing. Sounds a lot like my badly written female character. So the other thing that happens at the end of this, and this is where it's interesting because up until the end of chapter 9, I felt like this was a normal anti-hero meets girl cop, convinces girl cop he's actually the good guy trying to track down the really bad guys, charms her, they get the bad guys together, they live happily ever after, and then bam, she dies. And by the way, during that whole time, she never actually gave in to any of his advances at all, despite laughing once or twice, right? So
Never even gave him a weapon.
never even allowed him to have a weapon, exactly. Like, she was not being charmed, and that's, I appreciate that fact. They kept her character from being, like, just that stereotypical female character, and then they took it on its head and said, oh, actually, she dies. This is a tragedy, not a heroic story, right? They just changed the tone of the movie completely, and then they put him in a situation where it seems like he's not going to get out. Everything's gone really bad, and I'm thinking, is this just kind of how it's going to end? This is the final episode, issue, chapter, whatever you want to call it, and things are looking horrible. And then I find out it's like 7 pages long. Oh, okay, maybe they got time to wrap this up in a way that's not super tragic. But how did you guys think about the ending? What did you guys like?
I actually had kind of hoped Raj would kill him and get away with it.
Yeah? You were hoping for a super dark, tragic ending?
I thought it would.
He likes his endings dark.
I do like my endings dark. No, I thought it would actually add a lot to the story overall if this criminal mastermind does get away with it, or if Kid Crimson escapes, but Raj is still alive. Oh my god,
this is actually the prequel to a series about Raj.
Raj takes on the mantle of Kid Crimson, and he becomes a better version, like a good version of Kid Crimson.
Or we find out that Raj Tevaran is the first Senate aide, reporting directly to some U.S. senator somewhere, and has a great deal of political sway as well.
Oh, and then we get political intrigue. Oh man, that would be good.
Exact. See, that could have gone into a great little story there. So if only Raj had killed Kid Crimson. So I vote we ask our we retcon that. Apparently Brazen Hall is writing fan fiction himself. Brazen, I'd like you to rewrite chapter 10 where Kid Crimson dies, Raj wins.
All right, so
I think the ending is appropriate for what it is. Again, this has got the Dresden Files vibe to me.
And the
guy
Dresden
gets
Files
the
can
crap-
be really tragic. The
guy
author
gets-
there kills off some really or makes some
Meaningful
bad things
characters.
happen to meaningful characters.
Yeah. The hero, so to speak, at least your main character, gets the shit kicked out of him.
A Dresden classic, they call it.
And
If he
that's
doesn't
just
get,
it, though.
if he
This is-
isn't exhausted and bruised on every part of his body by the end of a book, it's only because he was a ghost for part of it.
And doesn't have some new permanent problem attached to him.
Oh yeah, he's gotten more powerful and he has more flaws. Like there you go. All right. Anyway, what were we talking about? Star Citizen. Okay, so
I think we just finished the last part of the last chapter, but Gray has some words. Gray.
Yeah. What we were saying about how do we feel about the ending and the whole like Dresden File thing and all that. I think that that's okay. I think that having this story be something that doesn't end super super dark allows them to publish it.
and not
if
everybody's
they had
like that
put
was
this
terrible.
If they had put this out much earlier in the Star Citizen universe, when this published, almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
This is the first one, I think.
Can you imagine the gut punch?
I think that would
This
have, excuse me, it would have definitely set up Star Citizen as a gritty, dark universe.
Yeah, 100% of Calathulus approve.
I think it would have
Hey.
set it up to be a much grittier universe than we've had described to us.
That's fair. Although, to be Bridger, I've had this told to me: Cali-Thulu is best Thulu.
Oh, okay. Well, can't go wrong with that then.
No, it's hard to.
So, the ending also sort of ends with another cliffhanger, right? It ends like a to be continued, and it does that. The other thing that I kind of like is he's like desperately trying to stop the murder of this senator, and not because like now everything that drove him before was like I hate slavers. Now he's just like I don't want Raj to get away with this. That son of a bitch. Like he probably wouldn't normally care about Senator Harrington, but he's like this guy wants that, and Caro wants that. I don't want that, right? So
No good. Yeah.
So then he calls the police and he's like, listen, they're going to assassinate the senator. You've got to call it off. And they're like,
And
sir,
they're just like,
how do you know
yeah.
that? And he's like, it
Explain
doesn't
this
matter.
to me.
I can't tell you why. I just can tell you that it's going to happen. They're like, thanks for your concern. And he's like, I'll take care of this. And just blasts the whole thing with like random shots in order to force everybody into cover. Like that was plan B was way better than plan A in this case. just shooting at the senator randomly was better than calling the cops if you want to save his life.
Yes.
That was great. And then he has the radio of the guy. It was very John McClane, right? He's listening in and waiting for him to call back, and then the guy realizes when nobody's answering, he's like, Gaz, are you there? Wait, Ethan?
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah, that was the ending for what it was as a dime store novel kind of thing. The ending was excellent, so I really enjoyed it. Again, Raj winning would have been better, but we won't go into that.
Yeah, and then he does get some information out of Raj at the end. Basically, Caro's trying to fake his own death, right? He wants Senator Harrington to die and it to be ambiguous and there to be rumors that Senator Harrington was actually Caro. And that's the whole point of this whole thing is he was trying to kill three birds with one stone, really. He wanted to pin it all on Kid Crimson.
Ethan,
he wanted Senator Harrington out of the picture for some reason, and he wanted everybody to think that Harrington was Caro and Caro was dead, so that he could start somewhere else fresh, so that he would have less brand recognition, I guess.
But that still leaves the problem. How does he recreate his criminal enterprise, no one knowing he's also Caro? Caro's still alive, so he'd have to kill all of his top lieutenants, and it got a little
spring cleaning for bad guys.
But
It sounds a little contrived when you start talking about, he's trying to kill himself.
Yeah.
Now, there is an interesting
why?
bit at the end. Raj, his former friend, is offering to give him what he wants. He says, I can get you Caro. I know how to get to him. I can show you where he is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he says, not good enough. I need to punch him forever until he is dead. Because this is sort of the flaw of the character, right? He is so angry at this betrayal and that the death of Reyna, who you know, he wasn't in love with her, but he obviously cared about her. She was fair. She gave him a chance. He connected with her for, you know, at least a day. It's a person that he knew that was murdered in front of him, that he wanted to save, that he couldn't do anything about. All of these emotions come up and basically thwart his easiest answer of getting Karo. And instead he'll take the short-term pleasure of beating this guy to death.
Yeah.
Raj was more jelly than body. The Tavarin made out of jelly? Confirmed.
That would be... that would make them more alien.
I need to punch him forever will be his next custom shirt.
So 2 weeks later, he's back in space. He got to a doctor. The advocacy now thinks that he's a murderer of advocacy agents. They sort of knew that he had killed people, but they didn't have any proof. Now they think he's a cop killer. So now he's branded forever as a cop killer, and that's much worse, obviously. But then we have this little epilogue that describes, Karo is looking at the video of, Kid Crimson got away, and it looks like Raj underestimated this guy. Karo won't make the same mistake. And it's just, where's the rest? Where's more? I gotta figure out what happens. Damn it.
See, but that's
they could.
That's
you're
the next
right.
story.
You're absolutely right. This could be a setup for a book. You could easily write a book about you could have flashbacks to like prequels of the story about how he got the Vanduul blade. That could be part of it, or it could be a series of short stories, Tales of Kid Crimson, and this could be one of the main ones.
This feels like the setup to either a bunch of short stories or a very long book.
Yeah,
it really does.
I would totally buy that.
Or it could be the setup to some new erotic fiction.
Oh, thank you for that. We're done.
I just heard the collective groan from Twitch, and that was worth it to me.
Well, guys, thanks for tuning in today. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Actually, we are running quite long, not least of which because we spent 20 minutes trying to figure out why YouTube was failing on us there. With the gray bar and then the failure to unscramble our porn. Remember, your homework for next time or the time after that is to read Cassandra's Tears. It's a different kind of story, a more heroic, very much a Luke Skywalker character in that one. Although it's more like a Malcolm. No, because it's like lawful good. So that's why I was thinking Luke Skywalker. So maybe it's more like a Luke Skywalker. What do you think? You guys have read Cassandra's Tears, right?
I don't know that I could take another Luke Skywalker Jesus figure in sci-fi.
Yeah.
He's just, but you know what? The thing about Cassandra's Tears is that this is a Cal Mason story, right? It's written like fiction because I think it is a piece of fiction written within the fiction of this fiction.
It's metafiction.
It's metafiction.
Fictionception. That's what this is.
So we'll talk about Cassandra's Tears and or the next update to Arena Commander and or any other news that they have out there in the next couple of weeks. We'll be recording live 2 Sundays from now, the 25th of January, 2015. Welcome to the new year, everyone. We'll see you then.
See you soon.
See you later.
Oh my god, why did the spinner get stuck?
Because spinners, they don't stop. Except when they do.